When I opened my Bible this week to the lectionary gospel passage from Luke that was just read, I was sitting at the Wendy's drive-thru in the car by myself, and before I knew what I was doing, I muttered aloud, "Oh man, what am I supposed to do with this?" I later went on a search for some help with this passage, and I came across these comments which voiced what I was feeling. Really, Jesus? Really? You can't be serious about what you say in this week's gospel message. Can you? Come on, Jesus. Hate my relatives? Carry a cross? Give up all my possessions? Surely you don't want this passage to be taken literally. You can't mean what you say here, Jesus. There must be contextual issues, like we said in theology school. You must be using hyperbole here, or overstatement, maybe some sarcasm, or there must be something that we can grab a hold of in these words to mitigate the sting of this directive. The commentator I read went on to say, "My fellow preachers, teachers, and bearers of the good news of Jesus Christ, have you ever had these kinds of thoughts as you contemplate this passage from Luke's Gospel? Have you ever been tempted to soft pedal it, to rationalize it, to explain it away, or even flat out say Jesus doesn't mean what he says here?" I know I have. I've also been very grateful when this week rolls around to be able to choose, the commentator said, from 3 other possible lectionary passages, thereby avoiding altogether this sticky scriptural wicket. What does it mean to carry your cross in 21st century America? Even though I was tempted, something inside said to me, I cannot ignore this passage. So here goes. Notice how the passage begins. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus. That's the situation surrounding what Jesus has to say. Large crowds were following Jesus. Now that's not our situation here today. It's a nice crowd. It's a nice crowd, but it's not necessarily a large crowd. I wonder how it might change us if it were a large crowd. What if our problem every Sunday, our biggest problem, was trying to manage the crowd? What if we needed somebody out in the parking lot to direct the traffic, and we had to hire off-duty police officers right out here on Main Street because the traffic couldn't get by? What if we had to have somebody here every Sunday to set up extra chairs because there just wasn't enough seats in the pew? What if we had to put a big screen in another room to pipe the worship service to the overflow audience? I wonder how I would react as the preacher in that kind of situation. I don't know. It would be oh so tempting to do things and to say things that would ensure that people keep coming and that more and more people want to come. But Jesus does something very strange here. It's almost as if Jesus is not all that excited about there being large crowds. And he wants to make sure that those who are there know that Jesus is not looking for a fan club. He's seeking disciples. And there's a difference. Maybe part of what this passage has to say to us in 21st century America is that Jesus is still not seeking a fan club. He's seeking disciples. A few good men and women that will do the work of the kingdom. And he wants those who are applying for the job to go into it with eyes open wide. He wants us to know that if you want to be my disciple, here are the demands of the job. Some of the demands border on being offensive. Hate your family? What's that about? I thought Christians were supposed to love everybody, starting with our own families. Get rid of your possessions, all of your possessions. What happens then? What about personal responsibility? What about taking care of yourself so that you don't have to be dependent on anybody else and sponge off somebody else? This is not an easy passage to apply. This is one of those troublesome Bible passages. Jesus' words certainly would have shaken those who were in the large crowd that day. And I would imagine that many of them did not come back. They dropped out. In fact, is it not surprising that by the time Jesus reaches Golgotha's hill, there's only a handful who remain with him? Counted among them is his mother. His mother stood by him. And the disciple he called the beloved, but few else. So what about today? What are we to do with his words? Let me say just a few things about them. First of all, I don't think this passage is at all about eternal salvation. It is not about what it takes to get into heaven. Jesus is not telling us that in order to be saved, we have to get rid of all of our possessions and we have to hate our family. For salvation, Scripture is so clear throughout that salvation is God's gift. It's given freely without needing to be earned or dependent upon our merit. So we can go ahead and relax right now, I believe, that it is God who saves. Did you get that? It's God who saves. We don't save ourselves and nobody else saves us. Only God. Salvation was accomplished once and for all, and we had nothing to do with it. That's why I sort of cringe when folks talk about winning souls. You ever heard people say that? Well, we won this many souls. Or people talk about getting saved because they came to their church, or they heard their preacher, or they followed their ministry. Hear this and hear this clearly. It is my conviction that only God has the power to save. Amen. And that work was done. It was finished. It was completed on a hill far away where stood an old rugged cross. Now, how folks come to an awareness of their own salvation, that can't be predicted. It's as varied as the curves in our fingerprints. All I know is that God's grace is sufficient to redeem your life and my life. Whatever twists and turns our lives take, God has taken care of it. Okay? The second thing I want to say, though, as we think about this passage, is that Scripture is so clear, crystal clear, that the heart of Jesus, that Jesus' heart was most definitely on the side of those who had received the short end of life's stick. Did you get that? Jesus is on the side of those who have received the short end of life's stick. Now, I don't know how we can possibly read the Gospels and not find at the center of Jesus' message the very notion that the prophet Isaiah presented when Isaiah said, when the Messiah comes, every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places shall be made smooth. You see, the work of mercy and justice, of making things right in the world, the work of trying to make a more level playing field in the world is the work of God's kingdom. Amen. Now we can debate, and throughout history there has been a debate about how that playing field gets leveled. in this world? Is it the role of government to level the playing field for everybody? Do we wait on the charity and philanthropy of the privileged in order to make a level playing field, a more level playing field? What is the Church of Jesus Christ's part and role in justice and mercy? Well, my experiences over the past 3 years have convinced me that not only should the church be in the work of justice and mercy, but the church ought to be leading the way. Amen. If Jesus is our model, then we ought to be able to do justice and mercy better than anybody else. Amen. And the conclusion I have come to over these 3 years is that the best way for the Church of Jesus Christ to have an influence on leveling the playing field for everybody in this world, the best way for the Church of Jesus Christ to do that is to have Kathy and Lisa sitting in the same pew on Sunday morning or whenever the church gathers for worship. What do I mean by that? Who are Kathy and Lisa? I want to share with you something I wrote 3 years ago when we were still exploring the idea of opening and establishing this church. I wrote this: Kathy is my school friend, whom Jean and I stayed with, she and her family, for a few days while recently visiting out of state. Kathy is a strong woman of faith. She grew up in a strong family of faith. Kathy and her husband and her 2 children live in a 10,000 square foot home with an in-ground pool in the backyard and a movie theater on the lower level. That's Kathy. Lisa is a woman I met just a month prior to when I wrote this. I met her outside her tent, beneath a bridge on the Poinsett Highway in Greenville, South Carolina. What in the world do Kathy and Lisa have in common to the point that they should ever be sitting on the same pew? Are they both children of God? Yes. Well, that's all they need to have in common. I wrote this about them. They both gave me a hug this month. I saw both of them smile. Both of them love their dogs. They both spoke of aspirations, goals, dreams in their lives. They both became teary-eyed when talking about some painful things in the past. Now, it may be easy for most of us to see why Lisa might need Kathy. But we might find it more challenging to understand why Kathy needs Lisa. Maybe this scripture gives us a clue about the answer to that question. You see, Lisa knows her dependence on crack cocaine has put so much in the way of her seeing and experiencing God's incredible love for her. She knows that. She knows that because, you see, the world around her tells Lisa over and again, the messages are clear: Lisa, you're messed up. She knows, Lisa knows what a fragile condition her life is in. Some of you know that. But you see, it's not so easy for Kathy, or me, or some of you. You see, that to which we cling sometimes is so validated by the world around us as being a part of the the more excellent way, as being a part of how we measure success, as being the essence of what we think security is all about, often we have a hard time acknowledging how much we are clinging to that which is only a facade. It is as if we are living in houses constructed like a movie set. Do you know movie set houses? There's a front. It's pretty, isn't it? What's behind it? Nothing. It's easy for many of us to miss the real thing. The real God. Really, Jesus? Jesus says, yes, my child. Really. In the past couple of days, I have learned of the death of two people whose lives were so very different, but whose lives in different ways connected with my life. On Saturday morning, I got an email from a friend. Her adult son, who had been living for several years in London, England, had been battling a brain tumor for a year. She opened her email that she had sent out to many friends by saying, at 3:05 a.m. London time, September the 3rd, 2016, my son Ben died peacefully. It was 1 year to the day after he had had surgery. He fought as hard as anyone could to live as long as possible. He was a loving and generous son, and our family will miss him every day. No words can describe the depth of our feelings about and our love for Ben. I grieve for and with my friend Beverly and her husband Joe, who were with their son in these final weeks of his life. The other death which touched my life this past week happened very near to here. A gentleman by the name of Alan, who regularly visited this church on Mondays, particularly for the meal, and at other times too, once in a while. He died on the steps of the Orville Baptist Church. I don't know much about the circumstances of Alan's death, or very many details about his life. I do know that he lived in the valley, the dark valley of addiction to alcohol. I'm not sure if he was homeless or not. I suspect he was. I don't know what family he has to grieve his death. But I grieve today. But this much I do believe with all my heart, that the same Jesus who died for me and who died for you and who died for Ben, the son of my friend, that same Jesus died for Alan. And although life in this world may have been, in one respect, a very uneven playing field for them, Ben may have had many more opportunities never afforded Alan. In the end, I believe Jesus welcomes them both into paradise. Do you? What is Jesus looking for in a disciple? I hear him say, I need someone who is willing to trust God in all things. Really, Jesus? Trust God in all things? Well, that's not in my nature. Is it in yours? It is so tempting and really